The New York Times published 3 articles about the Pentagon Papers before President Nixon tried to shut them down. The New York Times published the first of 3 articles based on the documents Daniel Ellsberg and Anthony Russo gave them on June 13, 1971. Because the government information, now known as the Pentagon Papers, was top secret, the government was granted a temporary injunction against the New York Times after their 3rd article was published. According to the Nixon administration, the information was a threat to national security. On June 18, 1971, the Washington Post published an article excerpting the Pentagon Papers, but was also issued an injunction to stop. Nixon's plumbers were the same guys that broke into Watergate. The judge in Ellsberg's trial, Matthew Bryan, found out about the plumbers' actions against Daniel Ellsberg from the Watergate trials, which were also taking place in 1973. Howard Hunt, G. Gordon Liddy, and other Watergate burglars were indicted in September 1972. During the next 2 years, numerous President Richard Nixon's advisors resigned, and the president came under congressional investigation for his involvement in the burglary. President Nixon resigned in August 1974. Charges against Ellsberg were dismissed when it was revealed Nixon had men spy on him. The charges against Daniel Ellsberg for leaking the Pentagon Papers were weak. A completely lost credibility after it was discovered the government had wiretapped Ellsberg and broke into his office. President Richard Nixon was convinced that the leak was part of a conspiracy against him and employed his plumbers to plug up the leak. The plumbers included G. Gordon Liddy, a former FBI agent, E. Howard Hunt, a former CIA agent, and John Paisley, a liaison to the CIA. They tried to find a link between Ellsberg and communism by breaking into his psychiatrist's office to find something that would discredit him in court. When it came to light that the plumbers had illegally tried to get evidence against Ellsberg, the judge declared a mistrial, and the charges against him and Anthony Russo, who helped Ellsberg copy the documents, were dropped. The papers revealed 70% of the reason for continuing the war was avoiding U.S. humiliation. The reasons for U.S. involvement in Vietnam varied. Sometimes the government claimed it was to help the South Vietnamese government hold off communists. Other times was to contain China and prevent the spread of communism in the region. In 1965, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara articulated a breakdown of reasons: 70% to avoid a humiliating defeat, 20% to keep SVN South Vietnam territory from Chinese hands, 10% to permit the people of SVN to enjoy a better, freer way of life, also to emerge from crisis without unacceptable taint from methods used. Truman, Eisenhower, and JFK were involved in Vietnam much earlier than the public realized. According to Erwin N. Griswold, the Solicitor General of the United States, there were 11 classified facts in the Pentagon Papers. In the larger report of the Office of the Secretary, Defense Vietnam Task Force, there were drop-dead secrets. A separate document including 17 irreparably damaging secrets was submitted to a court in New York State, all intended to keep the restraining orders against the media in place. Griswold claimed that the names of CIA agents still in the field would be exposed, Russia would gain access to the U.S. agenda in Southeast Asia, South Vietnam would be increasingly vulnerable, and the U.S. communication network in the region would be compromised, among other assertions. What they didn't want the public to know, however, was more about what role the US had played in the war as it developed. When the French were the colonial power in Indochina, President Harry S. Truman and the US had supported their efforts and ignored their warnings after the French defeat at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. The report discussed how Presidents Dwight D. Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy had intervened to prevent a communist takeover of South Vietnam and escalated a policy of limited risk gamble to one of broad commitment, respectively. President Johnson expanded the war into Cambodia, and Laos but lied about it when asked. President Lyndon B. Johnson told the American public that the U.S. sought no wider war and that he would not send troops into Cambodia and Laos, but he did. Between July 1970 and February 1971, according to the Pentagon Papers, U.S. planes conducted 3,634 tactical airstrikes to help support Cambodian government forces. These attacks were disguised as having been carried out in South Vietnam. Revelations about President Johnson's actions continued. He built up a covert war and moved toward overt war a full year before the public was told. He bombed North Vietnam in 1965, even though the intelligence community told him that it would have no effect. Lyndon Johnson lied about attacks to justify sending more U.S. troops to Vietnam. On August 4, 1964, the day Daniel Ellsberg started working for the Department of Defense, President Lyndon B. Johnson announced that the North Vietnamese had attacked 2 U.S. destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin 2 days prior. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was used as a justification for war, and President Johnson took it to Congress to get the Gulf of Tonkin resolution passed, funding an increased U.S. presence in Vietnam. The problem was the Gulf of Tonkin incident didn't take place the way the President Johnson and his advisors, especially Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, presented it. Perhaps due to miscommunication or out of desperation, the facts behind the Gulf of Tonkin incident reveal that the U.S. destroyers may not have been the targets of the North Vietnamese on that day in August and, without question, a second attack that the U.S. claimed happened never took place. The U.S. paid lip service to South Vietnam's president but played a role in his assassination. The Pentagon Papers exposed the role the U.S. played in the overthrow and assassination of Ngo Dinh Diem on November 2, 1963. The U.S. had been advising the South Vietnamese up until Diem's demise, but his death prompted a much larger role for the U.S. in the region. After President John F. Kennedy was assassinated on November 22, 1963, President Lyndon B. Johnson continued his policy of increasing U.S. participation in the war. According to the Pentagon Papers, the U.S. government knew much more about the insurgency, the coup. In August 1963, the Kennedy administration sent another, more forceful message to the coup plotters, saying that the U.S. would support the coup if it had a high chance of succeeding, but the participation of U.S. forces would not be permitted. In October, Diem was told to resign by the leaders of a coup against him, including his own generals, and was later captured and killed. The U.S. had been aware of the coup, but the assassination was not part of the plan.
Hey guys, thank you so much for the support and likes and comments down below, and also thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to see you in the next video. Then take care, bye.